into a story about one of our most beloved Hollywood couples of all time, Lucy and Desi. I don't know if you can see this behind me. This is my painting. I'm trying to move this because my image is reversed. That's a painting I did of Lucy and Desi behind me on their wedding day. They, they got married by eloping, and that's based on a photograph of Lucy and Desi when he had her in his arms and he was carrying her over the threshold of his dressing room of the Roxy Theater in New York, where he was performing at the time. But it's a marvelous story. Of course, I mentioned I put a video up about how Lucy and Desi met at RKO Studios, and you can watch that. I probably don't need to go into all of that again, but needless to say, Desi Arnaz was originally in the Broadway version of the Rodgers and Hart musical Too Many Girls. Lucille Ball admitted in her autobiography that she had seen the play when she was in New York. She did not meet Desi, but she saw him from the audience and she was electrified. And she said, that man has got star quality and charisma. And she wanted to go to La Conga, the nightclub where he performed. Desi Arnaz introduced the conga dance to America from Cuba. She wanted to go there, went there, and to her tremendous disappointment, it was Desi's night off, so she did not get to meet him that night. They were fated to meet at RKO Studios because Lucy was going to star in the movie version of Too Many Girls. They brought Desi Arnaz out to Hollywood to recreate his role, and they met before they were going to have their rehearsal that day. They were going to have a music rehearsal. Lucy was filming the movie Dance Girl Dance with Maureen O'Hara. And it was the day they had this big raucous fight scene where they had to tear each other's clothes and hair and punch each other and roll on the floor. And Lucy, the makeup artist, put a black eye on her. But she looked like a hot mess. Her hair was all disheveled. She had a black eye. Her makeup was all askew. She was ripped up. And Desi met her that way, and he turned to somebody and said, that's the ingenue for our movie? He did, he was, needless to say, he was not impressed. Lucy looked like trash in that moment. But later in the day, Lucy got cleaned up. She was wearing a beautiful tight yellow sweater. Her then blonde hair, her reddish blonde hair, was pulled back. She looked gorgeous, as we know Lucy looked when she was really together. And Desi, his eyes practically popped out of his head. There were witnesses who saw this, and he said, what a hunk of woman. And everybody present noticed this. They were very aware of the magnetism. People like Ann Miller, Van Johnson, other cast members. Absolutely true. It was instant magnetism. Everybody felt it in the room. There was like an electric charge. Desi approached Lucy with, do you know how to rumba, Lucille? And he wanted to take her out dancing that night. And of course, she accepted the invitation. They went out to a nightclub. And according to Lucy and Desi, they both wrote autobiographies. So it's fun to read the concurrent stories. They sat at a table and just talked and talked and talked. And I read in Lucy's autobiography, she said, I'm just going to admit it. I was in love in 5 minutes. I think few of us would question that those two were soulmates. They recognized it right from the start. They just found they had so many things in common, basic things. They both knew what it was to lose everything in your life. These are things I'll have to talk about in future stories. Lucy and her family lost their home in a tragic lawsuit in the late 1920s. The family was all split up. I promise I'll tell that story another time. Desi he grew up a wealthy playboy in Cuba, very privileged, had his own yacht, ponies, family had a mansion. The 1933 communist revolution came. Their homes were burned to the ground. They were forced to flee. Desi came to America penniless. He and his father had to live in a rat-infested warehouse. So Lucy and Desi knew what it meant to lose everything. and to have your family separated. They understood that. They innately got each other. And the soul connection was just electric. But they had problems right from the start because Lucy was based in Hollywood. Desi had just signed a contract with RKO, but it gave him a leeway where he had 6 months a year where he could travel with his band around the country. So that meant his being on the road, which was a big problem throughout the first decade of their marriage, hence why they did I Love Lucy, so it could just be home and be together in one place. So they were separated constantly. Most of their relationship, those first few months, was very, very expensive long distance phone calls. Lucy claimed it was hundreds and hundreds of telegrams back and forth, letters every day. And when they were together, the passion was undeniable, the love was undeniable. But Lucy was a realist. Desi was the idealist, the dreamer. He could be very impractical. She was everything about practicality. So she questioned a lot of things. She worried about the fact that she was 6 years older than him, the fact that he was so impetuous, the fact that he was going to be on the road all the time. She just didn't see any future for them. And it was one night they were in New York. She was there doing publicity. He was there doing his nightclub show. And they were at, I think it was El Morocco nightclub. I hope I got that correct. And a photographer even took a picture of them. It's in Lucy's autobiography where they're both just looking very stern and very serious. And Lucy said they were just talking about all the reasons why they could never, ever be married and they needed to break up. And so they did. Lucy went back on the road because she was on a studio tour. So she had to go to the Midwest. I think she had to go to Milwaukee. And she said it was while she was on the train. She received a telegram. And I'm paraphrasing this a bit, but it was just saying, it was from Desi, of course, saying, "My darling, I love you." Let me say that again. I love you. Let me say it again. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Lucy said she started crying so hard that that telegram practically turned to pulp in her hands. It was so wet with her tears. And anyway, from there, she had to go back to New York because it was now November. They got together for Thanksgiving. And she had to do publicity for Too Many Girls, which was about to be released. I'm assuming Desi did also, but she was the official star of the movie. And she was in her hotel room. Desi was sitting there on the couch, and Lucy was giving an interview to a fan magazine called Why I Will Always Be a Bachelor Girl. Basically saying she was not going to ever marry Desi Arnaz. She gave the whole interview. The reporter left. Desi came and said, "Well, honey, I'm making a liar out of you. We're getting married tomorrow." And she's like, "What?" "Yes, we're eloping tomorrow. I made the arrangements to be ready at 8 in the morning." And Lucy melted and she said, "Yes." And, and she lamented the fact she didn't have any nice clothes with her. All she had with her, I don't know if you can see in the painting, you probably can't. All she had was a black wool dress and this fur coat. Let me see if you can see a little bit, the fur coat that she had saved up to buy. She said that was the first ever fur coat she had owned in her life. It was a fox fur. That's all she had to get married in because none of her steamer trunks and luggage had arrived. So she was even fearful that was bad luck getting married in black. But nonetheless, it was a Saturday morning. She was ready at 8 in the morning and they drove to Greenwich, Connecticut. And they realized they had forgotten to get a wedding ring. And all the jewelry stores were closed. So Desi had to go to a Woolworths department store and buy Lucy a cheap brass band. That was Lucy's wedding ring, a dime store brass band. But Lucy did not complain. She was thrilled. She loved it. They got to the judge's office. And the judge said, "I need to take you to a better place to marry you." And so the judge got them in his car and drove them to a nearby country club called the Byram River Beagle Club. And there was snow on the ground. Lucy said it looked like something out of a Currier and Ives painting. There was a big roaring fireplace. big window, picture window with snow on the ground on the trees. And that's how Lucy and Desi got married, in front of that roaring fireplace with the snow on the ground. They had a wedding breakfast. And then they remembered, well, they had to get back to New York because Desi had a show to do that night at the Roxy Theater. So they had to just get right back in the car. The wedding license still exists. There are pictures of it, and it's got lipstick prints all over it. And Lucy admitted in her autobiography that she was kissing the license all the way back in the car, and that's why there are lipstick prints all over it. And they heard their wedding announced on the radio. And I think some of Lucy's relatives found out about it because it was announced on the radio. There's a cute little story. I was once in the house on Ogden Drive here in West Hollywood where her family lived, her grandfather, her mother, her cousin Cleo, and her brother Fred. And they got a phone call from Lucy. And when I was in there, I told the owner, when we were sitting in the living room, we're sitting in the room where the family got notified by Lucy and Desi they were just married. That's just a little personal story I have. So anyway, they make it back. They actually didn't make it back in time. They were late. They had some poor MC had to stall the audience forever and ever. But when they told the audience that Desi was late because he had just gotten married to film actress Lucille Ball, everybody was just cheering and happy and festive, and nobody was angry. I don't know how late they were, but Desi went backstage, changed into his tuxedo, slapped makeup on, went out there, did his conga show and everything. And then, as you can see, in front of photographers, he carried his bride over the threshold into his dressing room. And that is the story of how Lucy and Desi began their marriage. Their very tumultuous marriage, lots of ups and downs, but two soulmates. And that day, which was November 30th, 1940, is where it all started. And those two people have literally changed the world. Literally. When you look at how I Love Lucy has played to 78 countries, and it's been on the air, never off the air in 72 years. That's a fact. And it has played to over 3 billion people.